Let's talk about something uncomfortable, something that many young men, and people in general, quietly wrestle with. Why do nice guys finish last? At first glance, it seems unfair. You're kind, you're respectful, you go out of your way not to rock the boat. Shouldn't that be enough? Shouldn't that be rewarded? But here's the uncomfortable truth. Being nice is often not a sign of goodness, it's a sign of fear. You see, when people describe someone as nice, they're usually talking about someone who avoids confrontation, someone who's agreeable to a fault, someone who would rather suppress their own opinions than risk disapproval. That isn't virtue, that's self-erasure. In psychology, we understand this as pathological agreeableness. It's not a moral stance, it's a coping mechanism. It stems from a belief that if you just keep people happy, you'll be safe. But life doesn't reward people for avoiding risk. It rewards those who step into chaos, confront adversity, and take responsibility for shaping the world around them. People respect strength tempered by compassion, not submission disguised as virtue. And here's the kicker. When you act nice to gain approval, you're not being authentic, you're manipulating. Not intentionally, maybe, but you're performing a version of yourself to win favor. People can sense that in my music. They may not know exactly what's off, but they know it's not real. Contrast that with someone who speaks truthfully, who says no when it matters, who stands up for themselves and what they believe. That person might not be liked by everyone, but they will be respected. And that respect opens doors, the doors high. So what's the antidote? Learn to say no. Learn to tolerate discomfort. Tell the truth even when it's hard. Stop trying to be liked. Aim to be strong, honest, and useful. When you integrate assertiveness into your character, your kindness becomes powerful, not pathetic. It becomes the kind of kindness that defends the weak, speaks out against injustice, and inspires people to rise. Nice guys finish last, not because the world is cruel, but because the world needs men and women of courage, not appeasement. So stop playing small. Step into the responsibility of who you could become. And let your strength be the foundation of your kindness, not the absence of it. That's the kind of person the world actually listens to. Absolutely. Here's an expansion of the first keynote. Being nice isn't the same as being good or virtuous. It's often a strategy to avoid conflict. There's a common misconception that being nice is the same as being good, that politeness and agreeableness are moral virtues. But when you really analyze the behavioral patterns associated with so-called nice people, you begin to see something more complex and far more concerning. Being a nice is often less about goodness and more about a deep-rooted fear of conflict, rejection, or disapproval. It's not a noble stance. It's a psychological defense mechanism. A person behaves in a way they believe will reduce the chance of confrontation, discomfort, or emotional exposure. And while this might win them short-term approval, it often costs them their identity, their authenticity, and their self-respect. Let's break that down. A genuinely good person acts ethically even when it's difficult. They tell the truth when it would be easier to lie. They protect others even if it places them at risk. They confront problems when avoidance would be more comfortable. That's moral character. A nice person, on the other hand, often sacrifices honesty, courage, and assertiveness to maintain a peaceful surface. They'd rather go along with what's wrong than face the friction that comes with saying a no. They'd rather hide their boundaries than risk offending someone. On the surface, this looks like kindness, but underneath, it's anxiety. It's fear disguised as virtue. And society, for the most part, enables this illusion. From a young age, we are taught to be nice, to make others happy, and to not cause trouble. While the intention behind these teachings may be good, creating cooperative and respectful individuals, they often come at the expense of developing a strong sense of self. Instead of learning how to negotiate tension or navigate conflict, many people learn to avoid it altogether. They suppress their needs, bottle up resentment, and pretend to be okay with things they aren't. Over time, this chronic self-denial can lead to bitterness, burnout, or even depression. What's worse, this avoidance doesn't actually earn them the respect they're hoping for. People don't truly respect those who constantly fold, who never challenge them, or who agree with everything. Respect is born from authenticity, from boundaries, from the willingness to speak up when something's wrong. When people realize that someone is always saying yes to avoid saying a no, they begin to mistrust them. even if they can't quite articulate why. Intuitively, we all know that someone who cannot stand up for themselves cannot stand up for anyone else either. Moreover, being overly nice creates a kind of passive manipulation. When your entire identity is built around being the person who never says no, who always smiles, who always gives, you may believe you're doing it out of love or morality. But in reality, it's often an unconscious bargain. If I am nice to you, you will like me. You will take care of me. You will never leave me. That's not love. That's a transaction. Person doing that isn't living with strength. They're living in fear, hoping their niceness will shield them from pain. But it never does. In fact, it often invites the very outcomes they dread. They are overlooked, taken advantage of, and ultimately dismissed, because people sense that behind their smile is someone who refuses to stand their ground. Real strength lies in being both good and courageous. A good person doesn't avoid conflict. They face it head on with grace. They tell the truth not because it's easy, but because it's right. They have boundaries, they say no when needed, and they accept that not everyone will like them. That's what it means to be truly virtuous, not the illusion of goodness, but the lived reality of integrity. So if you're merely trying to be nice, take a closer look. Is it kindness, or is it fear hiding in a smile? Because the world doesn't need more agreeable people. It needs more honest, strong, courageous people who are kind because they are strong, not instead of it. Certainly. Here is the expansion of the second keynote. People respect strength wrapped in kindness, not weakness disguised as politeness. Respect is not something you can beg for, perform for, or trick your way into. It's something earned through the integration of strength, clarity, and inner stability. And yet, many people confuse being liked with being respected. They believe that if they are polite enough, agreeable enough, and accommodating enough, others will naturally value them. But that's not how it works. Not in the workplace, not in relationships, and certainly not in the real world. People don't respect weakness dressed up as manners. They respect those who stand firm, those who carry the weight of their words, and who treat others well, not because they have to, but because they choose to. Kindness without strength is often ignored. If someone is overly agreeable but unwilling to stand up for themselves or set boundaries, they don't appear kind. They appear fragile. And fragility isn't inspiring. It doesn't demand respect, it invites people to walk over it. Not necessarily out of malice, but because nature abhors a vacuum. And if you don't claim your space, someone else will. If you don't define your value, others will do it for you. And it usually won't be in your favor. True kindness emerges from a position of strength. When someone is confident, stable, and self-respecting, their kindness carries weight. It's not transactional. It's not rooted in fear. It's not a performance. It's a choice, a decision to treat others with dignity while still protecting one's own. That kind of kindness makes people pause. It makes them listen. Because behind the gentle tone is a person who's fully capable of conflict but chooses peace instead. And that is powerful. We often admire people who are calm under pressure, who speak with conviction, and who don't compromise their values just to avoid awkward moments. Why? Because we know deep down that they're anchored. They don't need to scream to be heard. They don't need to impress you to feel worthy. And when they're kind, it means something. It's not the kindness of someone trying to avoid punishment. It's the kindness of someone who could dominate but chooses instead to cooperate. Now contrast that with the kind of politeness that's really a disguise. People who never disagree, who always nod along, who tolerate mistreatment. They may think they're doing the right thing, but they're not gaining the admiration they think they are. More often than not, they're being seen as inauthentic or even manipulative. Because when someone is consistently polite at the expense of their own values, it starts to feel fake. You can't build respect on a foundation of avoidance and self-erasure. Strength wrapped in kindness is what allows someone to say a no without being cruel, to offer help without becoming a doormat, and to navigate hard conversations with calm resolve. It's the kind of presence that makes people feel both safe and challenged, like they can trust you, but they also can't push you around. That balance is magnetic. That's what real leadership looks like, what true character feels like. So if you've been operating under the belief that being polite will get you further than being firm, it's time to reassess. People don't follow those who try to please everyone. They follow those who are grounded enough to be kind without losing themselves. Because in the end, politeness without strength is just silence, and silence never earned anyone respect. Certainly, here's the expansion of the third keynote. Authenticity, not approval seeking, earns long-term trust and respect. At the core of human interaction lies one essential currency: trust. And trust is not built on charm, politeness, or even talent alone. It is built on authenticity, the willingness to show up as your real self even when it's uncomfortable or risky. And yet, many people fall into the trap of approval seeking, believing that the best way to be accepted is to mold themselves into whatever others want them to be. But approval seeking is not connection, it's camouflage. And what's camouflaged is never fully seen, never fully known, and therefore never fully respected. When a person chases approval, they become a reflection of the expectations around them. Their words shift depending on who's in the room. Their opinions stay muted for fear of conflict. Their actions are carefully calculated to avoid judgment or rejection. On the surface, they might appear agreeable, polite, even likable. But over time, people sense the gap between who they are and who they're pretending to be. And that gap creates unease, even if no one can quite explain why. You can't fully trust someone who isn't fully themselves. You don't know where they stand. You don't know what they believe. And that lack of clarity makes real connection impossible. Authenticity, on the other hand, is not about saying whatever you want or acting without filters. It's about alignment. It means your words, your values, and your actions are in sync, even when that makes you vulnerable. Authentic people tell the truth when it's hard. They say no when it matters. They express what they think and feel, not because it's popular, but because it's real. And while that might cost them approval in the short term, it builds trust in the long run. Because when people know where you stand, when they can predict your character, even in high-pressure situations, that consistency creates reliability. And reliability is the foundation of all meaningful relationships in love, in business, and in leadership. Here's the paradox. The more you chase approval, the less of it you actually receive. Because people may smile, nod, or even praise your agreeable behavior, but deep down, they don't respect someone who constantly morphs to gain favor. They respect those who are rooted in something deeper. Approval seeking leads to insecurity. It trains you to outsource your self-worth to the opinions of others. And once you do that, you'll constantly shape-shift just to stay alike, which means you're never building real bonds, only shallow, temporary alliances. Authenticity, by contrast, is stable. When you live in alignment with your principles, when you let your yes mean yes, and your no mean no, people can relax around you. They know what to expect. They may not always agree with you, but they can trust that you're not faking anything. And oddly enough, when you stop trying to please everyone, you begin attracting the right people, those who value what you truly bring to the table. This is especially important in times of stress or uncertainty. When things go wrong, and they will, people don't look for the most polite person in the room. They look for the one who is solid, the one who can speak plainly, the one who is unshaken by the winds of public opinion. And that's not something you can fabricate in the moment. That's something you build by practicing authenticity every single day, especially when it's inconvenient. So if your goal is to be respected, trusted, and truly valued, stop trying to win everyone's approval. It's a race with no finish line. Instead, get clear about who you are, what you believe, and how you want to live. Then act accordingly. That's the kind of person people remember, not because they were always liked, but because they were always real. Certainly. Here's the expansion of the fourth keynote. Sacrificing your needs to please others leads to resentment and invisibility. It's easy to fall into the belief that self-sacrifice is noble, that putting others first all the time makes you a good person. And while there's value in service, in generosity, and in caring for others, there is a dangerous line many cross without realizing it. When you constantly ignore your own needs, desires, and boundaries in the name of keeping the peace or making others happy, you don't become more loved. You become invisible. You begin to vanish from your own life. And the tragedy is, most people doing this aren't even aware it's happening until they're already buried under years of quiet resentment. When you live in a pattern of chronic self-abandonment, always saying yes when you mean no, suppressing your truth, downplaying your needs, you send a clear message to the world. Why don't matter? and people take you at your word. They may not do it consciously or maliciously, but they'll begin to overlook you. They'll stop asking what you think. They'll make decisions without including you. Why? Because you've trained them to believe your voice doesn't need to be heard. The more you fade into the background, the easier it becomes for others to stop noticing you entirely. This is how resentment is born. Not in one dramatic moment, but in a slow drip of ignored needs and swallowed truths. You begin to feel bitterness toward others for taking so much from you, yet you're the one who never said no. You get angry that your efforts aren't appreciated, but you never asked for recognition. You feel hurt that people don't check in on you, that you never let them see when you're struggling. And here's the hard part to accept, that pain is self-inflicted. Because when you choose to hide your needs to be accepted, you are, in effect, rejecting yourself. There is a difference between sacrifice and self-erasure. Healthy sacrifice comes from a place of strength and choice. You give because you want to, not because you're afraid not to. But when your giving is driven by fear, fear of conflict, fear of being disliked, fear of seeming selfish, it stops being generosity and starts being self-betrayal. Over time, that builds deep internal conflict. You begin to lose your sense of self. You don't know what you want anymore because you've spent so long asking what everyone else wants first. And the world responds to how you treat yourself. If you consistently put yourself last, others will follow your lead. It's not because they're cruel, it's because you haven't shown them another way. You teach people how to treat you through what you tolerate, through what you allow, and through how you speak up. If you never draw boundaries, people assume you have none. If you never assert your needs, people assume you don't have any. And before long, you're not just unseen, you're forgotten. The way out of this cycle is not to become selfish or cold. It's to understand that your needs matter just as much as anyone else's. It's learning to say no without guilt. It's expressing your preferences without apology. It's standing firm in the knowledge that you are not responsible for everyone's comfort, and that true connection doesn't require you to shrink. When you honor your own voice, when you advocate for your own well-being, you step out of the shadows. You become someone who is both kind and self-respecting, someone others can actually connect with, not just lean on. Because the world doesn't need more people who disappear in order to be accepted. It needs people who show up fully, honestly, and unapologetically. That's how you build relationships based on mutual respect, not silent resentment. That's how you become visible again. Of course, here's the expansion of the fifth keynote. To finish first, you must be competent, courageous, and willing to confront discomfort, not just agreeable. The belief that being agreeable is enough to get ahead in life is one of the most persistent illusions holding people back. Many individuals, especially those raised to avoid conflict and prioritize harmony, operate under the assumption that if they are just nice enough, cooperative, non-disruptive, and easy to get along with, success will come their way. But life doesn't reward passive agreeableness. It rewards those who are willing to step into discomfort, take initiative, and cultivate competence in their chosen field. Finishing first requires more than kindness. It demands courage, skill, and the grit to handle the tough parts of life without flinching. Competence is foundational. If you are not good at what you do, if you haven't developed real skill, if you don't know how to bring value to others in a tangible way, no amount of charm or politeness will compensate for that. The world is competitive. Opportunities don't go to the most agreeable person in the room. They go to the one who can solve problems, lead when things fall apart, and make real impact. That's competence. And it's not something you're born with. It's earned through discipline, effort, and an honest assessment of where you fall short. The competent individual doesn't pretend to know everything. They relentlessly pursue growth, and that makes them formidable. But competence alone isn't enough. You must also be courageous. Because along the path to success in your career, your relationships, or your personal development, you will encounter resistance. You'll be misunderstood. You'll face criticism, rejection, and failure. If your instinct is always to retreat to comfort or try to win favor by staying quiet, you'll never reach your potential. Courage is the willingness to step forward even when your voice shakes. It's the choice to speak truth when silence is safer. It's the internal fire that says, I will not be overlooked and I will not betray myself just to make you comfortable. Discomfort is not the enemy. In fact, discomfort is often the very signal that you're growing. Yet agreeable people are conditioned to avoid it at all costs. They avoid saying a no. They avoid setting boundaries. They avoid taking risks. And in doing so, they avoid becoming who they're truly capable of being. If you want to finish first, if you want to lead, create, inspire, and actually shape the world around you, you have to stop avoiding discomfort and start using it as fuel. Every difficult conversation, every failure, every moment of vulnerability is an invitation to expand your capacity. The hard truth is this: agreeable people often get left behind not because they lack worth, but because they hide it. They stay quiet when they should speak. They wait to be chosen rather than stepping up. They let others decide their path, hoping that good behavior will eventually be rewarded. But life doesn't work that way. You must claim your space. You must step into the arena. You must be willing to fight, not in a destructive way, but in a deliberate, grounded way that says, I know what I bring to the table and I'm not afraid to prove it. This doesn't mean becoming aggressive or arrogant. It means integrating your kindness with strength, being someone who respects others but doesn't tolerate being used, someone who leads with empathy but isn't afraid to compete, someone who honors peace but isn't afraid of conflict. That balance of competence, courage, and calm assertiveness is what propels people to the front of the line. So if you've been playing the nice game, hoping it will get you what you want, it's time to reassess. Kindness is good, humility is good, but on their own, they are not enough. To finish first, you must become capable. You must become brave. You must be willing to make people uncomfortable, including yourself in service of what's right and what's possible. That's how you stop finishing last. Not by abandoning your heart, but by finally backing it up with your strength.